Hey everyone. If you have specific questions that you want answered since you're here first, post them in the chat and I'll answer those questions first. And I just do it that way so I just mute everyone so I can stay focused and keep answering questions and keep steamrolling through this. I have a presentation with more questions as well, but I'm going to go through that after we go through our questions. If you guys have any specific questions while you're here live with me. And, I want to thank you all for being here live with me. I'm recording from an Airbnb in Switzerland where I'm staying right now. This is a young lady's room that I'm staying in, and it's in Switzerland, Airbnb at the house. My family's here, and we're having a great time, but it's a new backdrop for every meeting. This one luckily has lighting here, but just like most European houses, does not have air conditioning, so I'm still a little warm, but it is what it is. So I'll have, let me share my screen on screens, higher screen. So I'm going to be I have Bobby Doves and the Danny's here. Okay, so slideshow, I'll just play it. I'm not even going to edit any of the slides. I'm just going to go for it. So we have one question so far. So I have a couple questions. So I'm going to go through some of the questions again. Thank you for being here today I think this is the week 4 or 5 of the Ask Me Anything calls where I just answer a bunch of questions. And it's a lot of fun for me to batch this all into one hour and a half, sometimes longer, usually longer. So the first question, how long normally does the Itin process take to be completed? And also, how long does it take to get an EIN? Well, an Itin is an individual taxpayer identification number you request for an individual, a person, not for a company. And the Itin process, when submitted correctly with a W-7, a certified copy of the passport, and whatever other documents are required based on your category of filing. In my experience of filing hundreds and hundreds of these, it takes between 3 to 6 months, sometimes longer, sometimes they reject it, sometimes, different things happen. So it takes between 3 to 6 months. Recently, I feel like it's been taking longer, but I think they're trying to be better. Amended returns are taking 3 to 6 months. Everything's taking a long time. The IRS got super backlogged from COVID and never caught up because apparently they introduced new tax rules and new filings and none of that stopped. The only thing that stopped was their work. So they've been very behind. And that's like question part 1, right? And then the EIN is the employer identification number. This is a number generally applied for by a U.S. business, and it was historically for just employment taxes, the employer identification number. However, it's just like how a company identifies itself, whether you're an employer or not. And this, when filed with the SS4 correctly, can take between 1 and 3 weeks. It's supposed to take 4 or 5 days, but it's long, and sometimes you have to check, and sometimes they don't mail the forms. It's really hit or miss. So when you're filing manually as a foreign person, it takes that long. Between a week and 3 weeks. And if you don't get it by then, you have to call them and reach out, and they have an EIN support number. So thanks for that question. Question number 2. I am a partner of a multi-member LLC that has 12 members. A couple are U.S. members, but the majority are foreign. My question is about the K3. Each member has equal basis and shares equally in profits. I would allocate U.S. source strictly to the U.S. members and foreign source to the foreign members. How does this replace the K1? Thanks for doing this. That is a great question, a technical question. So the question is really like, how do I complete form K3, K2 and K3 and K1 for a multi-member LLC or partnership? So in this instance, you still file a K1. The K1 is a very important form. You're still going to file the K1 and apportion the profit and loss to the partners as you would normally. What's different is now you have the K2 and the K3 in order to determine the sourcing of the activities. So it doesn't matter where the partner's from, it matters how you source the activities. So I did pin my video, thanks Danny. So yeah, pin video, spotlight for everyone. Yeah, I'm spotlighting. I hope that's the right way to do it. So the answer is you still have to file the Form K1 and you still have to file the regular 1065, but the K2 and the K3 are sourced based on the activities of partnership. So if you have, and there's 5 different categories. Let's actually look. Let me share my screen. Let's pull this up and look at it, because that's a great form. How to file Form K2 and K3. Form K2 and K3 and K2 are kind of the same form. Form K3, and I've done a number of them this year, and I love to talk about this stuff. Tax forms. So K2 and K3. And I think my video should be bigger than this, whatever. Let's open it up, the K3. And that's K2, that's K3, and here we have K2. There's a different K2 for 1120S. So generally, the first parts aren't going to apply. Generally, hold on, give me 1 second. Hey, Dwayne, thanks for coming back. Pin. Come on, I'll pin myself. I don't know if I pinned the spotlight. Sorry, Danny. He's my video guy. So generally, when doing a K2, we have to see what parts apply. Foreign tax credit limitation won't apply. You're not paying foreign taxes. And most of the form is about foreign taxes. If the U.S. partnership isn't paying foreign taxes, you don't really have to fill these out. I haven't had to fill them out yet because it's not the kind of clients I work with generally. They have foreign companies to pay the foreign taxes, and the U.S. partnerships don't. The most commonly filed portions are Part 10 and 11, distributions from foreign corps, all of this stuff. There's a lot of nuances, but most foreign-owned multi-member LLCs are going to be filing Part 10. Foreign partner character as a source of income deduction. How I understand it is the partnership has to determine this activity, whether it's effectively connected income or not effectively connected income. So this would be if you have a store in the U.S., it's effectively connected income, and then you have to determine if you're selling to Americans or to foreign people. So if you sell shoes and you have a shoe store and it's in the U.S., you would call all of the U.S. source except for the orders that you ship to Ireland or outside the U.S., right? And then if it's not ECI, like a service business or an investment business, you have U.S. source income, which is FDAP income, which we want to avoid. Other U.S. source income, which would be like service income or sales to U.S.-based clients. Again, if you have a digital business or drop shipping business. And then the last one is foreign source. So that's sales to foreign clients located outside the country, because there's 2 concepts. There's the U.S. trade or business, and then there's the sourcing of the income. And the sourcing is based on where the service is being delivered, also blended with where the ultimate buyer is. So if it's a service, it's where the service is being performed, but if it's a product, it's where it's being delivered. So you can have non-ECI U.S. source income and not be subject to income taxes. So that's the most important portion, and this is the partner's determination. So I think it's the partnership determination is here, and then the partner determination was basically their percentage of it. If I understand correctly, again, this is a brand new form, and I haven't done an extended amount of research. But I filed many returns electronically with this fact pattern. And then you complete X expenses. So we have the income on the first page, then we have the expenses on this page, and then all these other items. And then you complete section 3, which is going to be the allocation. And it's again of the assets, the liabilities, the gross income. You complete that. And that's really the part that almost all K2s have to be completed, because it applies to all of them. If you don't have pay foreign taxes, you don't have to complete the first 9 sections. And the K3 is a very similar concept. It's still Part 10 and Part 11. These are all about foreign taxes, foreign taxes, foreign taxes. Then we get to Part 10, and it's the same. It's really the same computation, but one of the forms goes to the partner and one goes to the partnership. So I think the partnership files a K2 and the K3 is partner by partner basis. So each partner gets their own K3, but the partnership file is a K2. So not every partner gets a K2, but every partner gets a K3. I hope that helps kind of clarify that question, because that's kind of that was a really good question. And that looks like that's the end of the new chat question. I'm gonna leave the chat up here, and then I'm gonna go to the presentation. I think everyone can hear me fine. We're all going. Let me hide this stupid meeting controls and go back to this little, to my questions here. Let's go to the slideshow. So we have a couple Canadian-based questions, which my new friend on the Telegram posed for us. Let's put this right here and let's keep me right here. Okay, so avoiding double taxation. This is for a Canadian. A Canadian asked a question about a C Corp, and it's really complicated. Taxes in the U.S. and Canada. I have planned to have work. I've emailed like 5 of my different colleagues in Canada to see which one wants to do a collaboration with me, so we can get to the bottom of some of these questions. But in general, a Canadian living in Canada pays tax on everything they earn in Canada. And if they have an LLC, in Canada, looks at an LLC like it does a corporation. So distributions are taxed as dividends, whereas in the U.S. they're not taxed. It's taxed differently, so it results in a lot of chances of double taxation. So they want to avoid that. So this Canadian has a C Corp that's going to pay taxes in the U.S. at the corp level, and he pays taxes only on his individual income when he decides to compensate himself with dividends. Is that correct? So the answer is I'm Canadian, or the question is, if I'm Canadian, if I have a U.S. corporation that pays taxes, when do I have to pay taxes on this in Canada? The easy answer is when you decide to pay yourself as with a salary or with a contract fee, a commission, or a dividend. That's all treated differently in the U.S., but that's when you would generally pay taxes in Canada. The problem is that if you're running a single owner service business out of a U.S. company while living in Canada, it's as if the U.S. company is doing business in Canada because the main owner and the main person working the company lives in Canada as well and is doing the work from Canada. So that's what you need to look out for. If you're the main person and you're in Canada, you need to protect yourself from having to pay Canadian taxes with your U.S. corporation. But generally, you pay tax in Canada when you pay yourself, as I understand it. And the follow-up, number 2, can a Canadian be employed by a C corporation to compensate himself? It wouldn't be traditional wages. And if you pay yourself as wages, we would call it more like fees or commissions or something. I don't like the word wages because then there are payroll tax implications. So I don't like to use wages per se, but you can definitely compensate yourself in some form to where it's an expense for the business and lower the business tax, and then it's income for you. So then you're paying taxes in on your income that you earn from the wages. So that's generally how you would do it. This is a very nuanced discussion, and it's really client for client. So I wouldn't take a multi-million-dollar company and just base it off this free advice. I would recommend you get more detailed advice. But if you're just getting started and this is holding you back, then get started. It's not that big of a thing for a small company, but for a big company, yes, you need to be very prepared. Q3 for Canadians. Can I contribute to a U.S. pension plan? Well, the answer is, I believe it's no. I'm not an expert in pensions, but for my clients that we've set up pensions, you can only, the pension plans are set up based on wages, and you can't pay yourself wages if you don't have U.S. work authorization. If you have authorization to work in the U.S. and can get a W-2, then yeah, you can contribute to U.S. pension plans. But if you don't have U.S. work authorization, you can't contribute to a U.S. pension. From my understanding, there may be insurance products or other like pension-esque things you can do, but every pension plan and 401k, most of them are based on have something to do with your wages. And you wouldn't, if you don't have work authorization, you can't give yourself a W-2 and run real payroll. So the answer is generally no, I think. I think it's no. Questions 4 from my Canadians. Oh, beautiful. I'm going to come back to you, Corey. Let's get up through this. How many Canadian questions we got? They dominate. Yeah, you're not hogging the conversation. The Canadians are. Let me finish these. Okay. Q4 for Q3. Okay, Q4 for Canadians. My husband would be the second member. Member, assuming it's a corporation or an LLC, as you suggested, dual ownership. It depends on the situation. Will it give both of us separate contribution to pension plan? Again, I don't think you can do a pension plan. Will your service include, sir? For our clients, yes, we incorporate companies and file incorporation reports and tax returns. We do all of that stuff. And we advise them on in better detail on how they should actually operate. So if this Canadian questionnaire, hopefully they're seeing this, wants to know, we can help you with everything, but we need more details. You know, the AMA is a good start to understand if I can conceptually grasp what you're doing, but you don't have very much information here. Does my C Corp need to file a DBA name? I went over this in the last video. You generally don't need a DBA unless you need to receive wires in a different name other than your company name. There's no other reason from my understanding to do it. Maybe legal reasons, but I don't believe so. Great. Okay, now we're done with Canadians. Let me get back to Corey. The business is NFT sales, so a lot of the time knowing the location of the customer is impossible. I'm not sure how to go about sourcing a customer. Okay, so that's why I asked, I should source foreign versus U.S. based on members' allocations. I don't believe any of the foreign partners should owe U.S. taxes. They do not live or work in the U.S. I'll get to this right now. So, if let's make this into a pointed question. Let me answer one question. So, how should we source the income of a foreign-owned partnership that has U.S. members and foreign members, all the business is done digitally, and you don't know the origin of who's buying your stuff? Then you have to guess. I would probably just put all 4 in. Oh, Corey's back. So Corey, I'm answering your question. So if you don't know where the buyers are, I would be inclined to put all foreign. And as long as you don't have a U.S. trade or business, then the partnership does not need to withhold taxes on the foreign partners. That's the argument and the potential complication with this business. Generally, if you have U.S. partners who are actively participating in the business, and then you also have foreign partners, the actions of the U.S. partners who live in the U.S. and who are working on the business create a U.S. trade or business. And in this instance, technically speaking, the partnership should withhold taxes on behalf of the foreign partners, which they can then file personal tax returns or business tax returns, depending on how they're investing, to get a portion of those withheld taxes refunded. It's not an ideal way to do it, but that's the risk you're facing when you have blended partnerships with foreign owners and U.S. owners who live in the U.S. It's a tougher argument to make if the IRS challenges you to say that you have no U.S. trade or business when half of the owners of the company are doing work every day inside the U.S. So it's a tougher argument. Will the IRS ask you? Probably not. They could. And to answer your question about the K2 and the K3, I would just put everything foreign for this purpose, because you don't really know the answer. So you might as well pick what's most beneficial to you and go about it that way. But I think that's I think there's pretty low risk of not withholding any taxes and doing it all like this. But I would probably keep my eyes open for maybe a better way to do it, depending on your volume. If it's a smaller business, it's probably fine like this. But if it's like doing huge numbers and you have a lot of assets and stuff, it's worth a private consult that we can go over and look at the stuff. Okay, so I don't know. So I'm going to go with that one. Back to the slides. You can ask me if you have another follow-up, Corey. Awesome. Can a new LLC be created as a C Corp where the owner is a foreign citizen? Or do we have to open the LLC and then convert it to a C Corp? I mean, this question I would restate into another question that says, how can my LLC be taxed as a C Corp? Because you need to file an LLC on its own as a regular legal entity that has its default tax classification. It only changes its tax classification with a formal election on Form 8832. On Form 8832, you can elect and choose that your LLC be taxed as a corporation, and that's the only way to do it. And yes, the owner can be a foreign person, of course. So I think that answers that question. Q8. Ooh, hold on. Non-U.S. person gets green card, becomes U.S. resident. What taxes are going to apply? Okay, this is a great question. I wrote the book on this. It's called Coming to America and Keeping Your Money. It's in Amazon. It's okay. It's a pretty good book. I'll write a better one next time. It's a good book, but it's a lot about immigration, not as much about taxes. Okay, so the question is, what taxes apply when you get your green card? When you get your green card, you become a U.S. tax resident. And as of that point, you pay tax in the U.S. on your worldwide income. That means you have to report all foreign bank accounts, all foreign entities, all foreign incomes, investment funds. You have to report and pay tax on all of those U.S. and foreign things. You do get a credit for taxes paid on foreign sourced income that pays tax in a foreign country. You get a credit for those taxes paid, but you have to file a Form 1040 and include everything. And the taxes that apply are mostly income taxes. For estate taxes, a good thing is that your exemption is going from 60,000 to 11 million per person. So there's a lot of benefits from a tax standpoint of becoming a resident, but it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing business in the U.S., it could probably be better to have a green card holder, be a tax resident. But if you have a lot of offshore stuff, then it's going to be more complicated. So those are the taxes that are going to apply specifically in regards to your income. Okay, in case of an audit, how long do we have to save our invoices? The IRS generally does audits based on bank transactions. You should keep your receipts and your records, they say for 5 years, I believe, without checking. They want you to keep your records for 5 years. That's the general statute of limitations. If you have it all digitally, it should be fine. And if you have all your bank statements and your financials and everything done, that's probably going to suffice in most cases. If you have financial statements and bank transactions and that's in QuickBooks, that's probably going to be fine. Your tax forms, they already have them. So, you don't need to save every single invoice, but they want you to save most of the stuff for 5 years, I believe. I would just say make it digital and save it forever. There's very little cost for saving stuff like that. Another green card question. One of you guys is getting a green card. Congratulations. Welcome to the U.S. A non-U.S. person gets a green card, becomes a U.S. resident. Amazing. In case of an audit, the IRS paying tax on it is fine. Previous year, if you compare a year, there are multiple X is fine. It's fine if it's considered non-business expense. Okay. I don't understand this question. What happens if the IRS audits me? If the IRS audit, first of all, the audit chances are let's say 0.01% of returns get audited. So most returns don't get audited. I've only worked on 5 audits in my 15 years doing this for hundreds and hundreds of clients. I'd say thousands of clients. And I've only done 3 audits or 5 or something, and they weren't even that bad. And that's because I started looking for audit business too. So it's very, very uncommon. And basically, you just have to prove your expenses, and they have to be from the period. Otherwise, the IRS will write them off, and they'll uninclude them, and they'll recalculate your tax and charge a late payment penalty on that tax. And that's it. It's not. It depends what the audit's for, but it looks like we're talking about income taxes. They're gonna review the year and recalculate the tax for that year. And if you put your expenses wrong in the other year, then you'd have to change the other year too. Can an F1 visa international student apply for an Itin? The answer is yes. Anyone can apply for an Itin. If you, I think I would push. I think we had this conversation. I would push for an SSN. Let's see. How does an F1 visa get a social security? Let's see if Google has anything for us here. You need a valid employment authorization. You need a request for an SSN letter and visit the office to get an SSN. I would push for an SSN. It's way better. So if you're on an F1, you need to get employment. So you need to get a job. Get a job on campus, get a local job, get a simple job, and then you need to get an employment authorization with your school. And then, I don't know if it's with your school, but you need to get the evidence of it. And then you can apply for the Social Security number. I mean, it looks like Colombia has a way to do it. At the social, here you go. This is the SSA, this is the Social Security Administration. So if you really want this, check out this form. They'll tell you exactly how to do it. Work eligibility. An F1 student is eligible for work. You're eligible for work on campus. You must get a letter from your official that identifies you, confirms your status, identifies your employer. I've hired F1 students before. Pay slip, your job, your start date, and then you get a social, and it's yours forever. So I would push to get a job at the restaurant on campus for a week or 2 weeks, get your social, and then quit if you hate it. It's going to be way faster than the Itin as well. It's 3 to 6 months. Cool question, though. Okay, we did that. I'm a Canadian citizen. I just did a lecture for a USA company remotely in my room. They want to pay me an honorarium to thank me for my work. I'm not a company's. I was the guy who did something digital for them. So if you're a Canadian citizen, if you're a foreign person, you're not in the US and you do a service for somebody personally, yeah, you complete the WABEN. I have a couple of videos on my channel about how to complete this form, and I did this 2 AMAs ago. So you can check out that video. I'm not going to go through the details. It's a very easy form, but that's the form that would apply, and they should just pay you the full amount, and it shouldn't be a problem. You would pay tax on it in Canada, presumably. And there'd be no U.S. tax filing or reporting or anything in the U.S. It's pretty straightforward. 13, for rental properties in the U.S., and I think this is my friend, you get to take a depreciation deduction. For a rental property in Colombia, would we get the same deduction from the IRS as other properties in the U.S. would? So the question is, how does a U.S. citizen depreciate foreign rental property? That's the question. And I have a great answer, and I'm going to sound smart with the answer. So regular properties, residential real estate is depreciated and the maker's depreciation over 27 and a half years. That's the life. So you get a house, you get to get 127 and a half of that value of that house as an expense every year, minus, of course, less the land. For acres, if for foreign investments in foreign properties, it follows, I believe it's acres. It's the alternate cost recovery system. So the makers is modified cost recovery system, and acres is for foreign properties and other things. So under acres, it's straight line, and it used to be 40 years, I believe, but they changed it 2 years ago to 30 years. So if you have a house in Colombia, you take out the land value, and then the house is depreciated just like it is in the U.S., but it's over 30 years instead of 27 and a half years. Another notable thing here is, another notable point to this is that when you buy furniture and you buy equipment, if you buy a heater, if you buy a couch, in the U.S., those are depreciated. You can depreciate those with bonus depreciation, expense them fully right away. I believe that with acres, with foreign property, you cannot claim bonus depreciation for acres property. So for foreign property, you cannot expense it all at once. It has to be over the original life of the property per the acres tables. So it's a little bit longer usually, and it's way longer than right away. So that's another consideration. It doesn't mean you lose it. It just means it's less of an expense every year, but you have the expense for longer. Question 14, how does the IRS determine the value of a condominium apartment since the depreciation is only on the building and the furnishings, not the land? So how to determine depreciable value of a property? That's the question. And it's based on the fair market. Well, it's based on your cost basis. So it depends how much you paid for the property. That's how you depreciate it. So if you bought a house, then that's whatever you paid for it, including all fees, all the stuff you paid, you capitalize it into the value of the house. You bought a house for $1 million. It's $1 million house. That's amazing. It doesn't matter if you have a loan. It doesn't matter anything. It matters the cost paid. If you have a loan, that's fine, but it still doesn't change the cost basis. Whatever you paid, you paid. Whether you paid $1 million cash or you got a loan for $1 million, it's the same cost basis. So how do you determine the separation between the furnishings and the land and the building? Well, the first step would be check the contract that you have. If that's specifically stated somewhere, that's great. Usually they have an estimated value of the furnishings. And if you can put it in the contract and you can attribute more to the furnishings based on your sales contract, that would be more helpful, because furnishings are generally, you can claim bonus depreciation and expense them right away. So it's a bigger hit, more tax refund in the first year. And so first step would be checking the contract you have, and how to determine the split between the land and the building. I mean, I have a story. It's fun because it's actually relating to my last question. This is one of the audits I was involved in. Generally, in my career, it's always been a 20% value of the property is for land. And that's generally what we've done. The IRS wants you to have just some kind of reasoning for how you did it. If you just say 10% or 20%, generally that's what most accountants will do, because there's not always a good way to separate this. In this instance of my client who got audited, he had a condo on the Hudson River in New Jersey, across from Manhattan. It was a really nice condo. And based on I guess we could have pushed back, but based on the state website, it valued the land. Let's say it was $1 million condo. They valued the land at like $520,000 on the state website, and it's pretty. It's like it was a lot for me to. Usually for condos, I'm using 10%, because the land is like, there's only so much land and there's so many condos. But this agent made that change to it and reduced the depreciation greatly. So in my experience, the agents you could use a state property report, anything that kind of shows the value of the land. If you can see what an equivalent lot would be worth in the area, then you can use that if you want. But that's generally not going to benefit you. So most of my clients and my colleagues and everyone I work with, 20% value of the property is what they take for land. Again, depending. That's like what most people do. But I have an experience of an auditor changing that. And it didn't cause a huge issue, but it definitely increased the tax, right? So it's yeah. And if you have any kind of way you can do it and you can show it, the IRS will take that. But most people are just taking 20%. But if you can look at land comps and document it and then assess it that way, generally the value of the land in the fair market is going to be higher. But when you have a house on it, it shifts. So you just need to have some kind of way to do it. And when you show the IRS, they'll either take it or they won't. So it's kind of a bad answer to a good question. Sorry. Does Colombia have similar depreciation deductions? Yeah, I went over that before. Actual Colombian tax law? I have no idea. I have no idea how they expense stuff in Colombian taxes. Good question, but I don't know the answer. Does a foreign company or person that owns the rental in Colombia and pays out all of incoming rental cash or expenses have any minimum or default tax to pay in Colombia? I'm assuming not Colombia with a U, Columbia, South Carolina, where I grew up, more Colombia with the O, the country. So some clients that I know that have properties in Colombia, I think they use US Airbnb and they don't even report it in Colombia because the money comes to the US company and they own the property in their name. They just don't report it in Colombia and they report it only in the US. So I'm not sure how it works in Colombia, but generally if money goes into your account in Colombia, if you're using a Colombian bank account to run these rentals, then there's no avoiding taxes. The government just takes it from your bank. So I think if you're running it through a Colombian account, they're going to take the taxes. I can't comment on how the taxes work in Colombia, the country. In Columbia, South Carolina, it's the same as it works everywhere. But that's, yeah, it depends how you run it. If you run it through Colombian banks, then yeah, you're going to do it. But if you're using Airbnb, you can probably get away with not filing taxes in Colombia, but that's not official advice for you there. That is going to be, this is free advice, so want to hold up an audit. So I was looking for another message. I guess Tony can't get in the call. Oh my gosh, it was a long one. Okay. This is like 20 questions, guys. Who asked me all these questions? This is a hypothetical scenario. If we purchased the property for cash via US LLC and loaned our LLC the money to do it from our personal account, the other business, the loan payment pay for sales and business expense via LLC. A loan payment is not an expense. A loan payment interest is an expense, but a loan repayment is not an expense. If we paid all of our cash flow after HOA, property management tax, a loan payment back to us to other country, we have zero profit in Colombia is concerned. How about in the U.S.? Maybe you can make that work in Colombia, but in the U.S., it's all about the income and the expenses. A loan payment and a distribution are not expenses, and if you're paying your self-management fees, it's still income to use somewhere else. Doesn't matter whether the LLC and the other company making the loan are both pass-through businesses. More specifically, the LLC person condo is disregarded entity totally owned by another LLC. Does it hold true? So I'm going to completely hijack this question and talk and pontificate. Let me see what the next one is. Good. I'm going to hijack this question and answer a different question. And I'm going to speculate on it. But what is the best way to own a real estate property in a foreign country? What is the best way for a U.S. taxpayer to own foreign rental properties? That's the question, because that's what we're getting to here. You need to know the local laws, and you need to assume you're going to pay tax on the profit locally, because as far as real estate is concerned, if you're paying taxes in Colombia, you can get a tax credit in the U.S. So if you're paying taxes in a foreign country because you have a foreign rental property, you don't lose that money. You get a credit for the equal amount in the U.S. So if your rental property makes $100,000 and you pay $30,000 in Colombia, you're going to pay no tax on that $100,000 in the U.S. because you're going to have a $30,000 credit. So it's generally pretty clear and easy to avoid double taxation when there's physical properties like rental properties. And that's the first explanation for this. The second part of this is you need to determine first how to best to legally protect yourself and your assets. So if you're buying a property in a foreign jurisdiction as a U.S. person, you need to determine, before the tax stuff is concerned, in my opinion, you need to determine the best way to legally protect your ownership of that entity, of that property. Because if you're buying a property in some country and you put it in the name of something else, but someone else can just take it or change it or move it, you need to protect yourself. So you need to talk to local property attorneys and local asset attorneys and whoever locally is to see how you can own it and the best way to own it from a local tax perspective as well. Very often in these situations, my clients will have a foreign entity which will own the property. You could own it with an LLC in certain jurisdictions, which is great, but you still have to deed title that LLC up in their property transfer system. So often we have a foreign entity or an offshore entity that could either own a U.S. LLC for operational purposes, or you can have a foreign entity that owns the property and then you just operate it all through a separate LLC and just keep it very basic in the foreign country. Because you need to first protect your assets, protect your investments. Number two is you need to have a really good operational structure so you have an easy way to collect rents and an easy way to pay for stuff that you need to get fixed. And then number three, you need to make sure your tax optimized in both jurisdictions, because if you don't own the property safely and you can't operate, then the taxes become mute anyways. So once you determine the ownership and how you're going to operate the most efficient operation, then you factor in the taxes, maybe tweak the operation. But then you have to first determine local tax implications. And then the last step is really the U.S. tax implications, because locally, if you have you have to do it the right way locally because that's where the property is located. If you don't obey the tax laws in the country and you own property in the country, then the country could potentially take your property. I don't know how it works in every country in the world, but that's my train of thought, and that's how I would do it. So this question is kind of skipping around the point. Not skipping around the point, but really trying to it's just jumping around between those three things. Once you confirm who owns something, then you can confirm how best to operate, and then you can confirm the other stuff. But having loans between different companies and stuff is fine. A loan is a great way to take money out of one jurisdiction without it being a dividend. So if you have to operate wholly from a Colombian company, you loan the money to the Colombian company, and we used to be the only way to get money into Colombia. And then to get the money out, you say it's a repayment of the loan. And that way it's not income to you, but it's also not an expense to the company. But it should be a way to get the money out without any withholding taxes. Preguntas en español. Hola a todos, gracias por estar aquí conmigo. Ya estoy en Suiza con la familia. Estoy en un cuarto de un Airbnb donde estoy y estoy muy feliz de tener sus preguntas en español para que puedo contestar todo y explicar lo mejor que puedo. Entonces, vamos a avanzar a la pregunta que tenemos. Y así es lo primero. Mercury Bank me funciona para abrir una cuenta de vendedor en Amazon si vivo fuera de Estados Unidos, pero puedo adquirir online si es necesario. Mi LLC y el fiscal postal code. La pregunta, ¿es posible abrir una cuenta de Mercury Bank si usted es un extranjero? Y mi respuesta es sí, es posible y es un banco muy bien. Me encanta Mercury Bank. Yo tengo, si usted no ha registrado para Mercury Bank, yo tengo un código en la descripción o aquí o en algún lugar donde puede registrar para Mercury Bank y ganar dinero si gastas un monto de dinero en el primer, como $400 ganas si gasta algo en 10,000 en 3 meses o algo así. No importa. Pero para abrir una cuenta bancaria con Mercury Bank necesita un negocio en Estados Unidos. Necesita una compañía, la EIN, una dirección y código postal. Sí, antes no necesitaba una dirección personal en Estados Unidos, pero necesitaba una dirección de negocio en Estados Unidos. Y eso puede ser su registered agent. No es lo mejor porque ellos van a mandar su tarjeta de débito a esa dirección. Entonces, si tiene un digital mailbox o tiene algo que puede usar para que recibe sus cartas, usa eso para que pueda tener su tarjeta de débito. Porque sin eso es una buena cosa tener, ¿no? Hay otro banco que puede usar también, pero sí, necesita una compañía. Yo creo que es imposible abrir una cuenta personal sin estar presente físicamente en Estados Unidos. Para la mayoría de los bancos como Chase, Bank of America, Truist, cualquier banco en Estados Unidos, técnicamente y típicamente tiene que estar presente en Estados Unidos para hacer eso. Entonces, Mercury sí funciona para usted y yo recomiendo que dice en la aplicación que está sirviendo clientes físicamente en Estados Unidos. Bueno, pregunta 2. ¿Necesita un certificado para cada nombre de entidad la cual estás haciendo negocios? Necesito, por ejemplo, un DBA. La pregunta es similar que antes. ¿Cuándo necesito un DBA para mi LLC? Muchos acrónimos. Solo necesitas un DBA si necesitas recibir giros o transferencias de dinero electrónicamente a nombre de otro negocio. Entonces, si su compañía es Bueno Teléfono LLC, si puede operar cualquier sitio web con esa compañía. Puede operar vendolápiz.com con esa compañía que yo mencioné sin problema. El único tiempo que necesita un DBA en mi experiencia es cuando necesitas recibir giros a nombre de ese DBA en vez que en nombre de su LLC original. Eso no es típico. Yo tengo uno o dos clientes que necesitan eso por razones muy, muy específicos. Entonces, normalmente no necesita un DBA y puede tener cualquier sitio web abierto sin problema. ¿Qué es un negocio comercial de Estados Unidos? Si viajo de vacaciones a los Estados Unidos y me encuentro con un cliente, tendré negocios comerciales en Estados Unidos. Oh, eso es de la última semana. Um, la pregunta es, eso es trader business. La pregunta es, ¿cuándo estoy haciendo negocios en Estados Unidos al respecto de los impuestos? Porque solo tiene que pagar impuestos en Estados Unidos sobre su actividad, sobre sus ganancias, cuando tiene un negocio en Estados Unidos. Un negocio, en inglés es un trader business. Eso es cuando tiene una oficina o empleados o está viajando a Estados Unidos um, para entregar servicios físicamente con los clientes. Eso es cuando quizás puede tener un US trader business. Y cuando tiene ese negocio en Estados Unidos, US Trader Business. Otra frase es ingreso conectado efectivamente con Estados Unidos, effectively connected income en inglés. Um, pero eso pasa cuando tiene presencia. Normalmente con dropshippers, con e-commerce, con servicios digitales, con varias cosas, no tiene esa presencia, entonces no paga impuestos en Estados Unidos. Si solo viajaste a Estados Unidos para reunirse con un cliente, eso no traiga tanto riesgo porque no está haciendo tanto, pero sí para cada cliente que tienes, tiene que visitarles y instalar algo en su computador físicamente en Estados Unidos. Si así tiene un problema, necesita más estructura, pero si está visitando y haciendo algún negocio mientras está en Estados Unidos, el riesgo es muy bajo que va a tener problemas con eso. Q3, tengo mi LLC. No, yo no soy un residente de Estados Unidos y yo vendiendo servicios. ¿Alguna de las mejores prácticas como el uso de carta de compromiso, contratos? Eso es una pregunta vieja que no contesté también. Um, si la pregunta, en resumen, siempre, si yo soy un extranjero y yo vendo servicios con mi LLC, cómo me protejo, ¿no? Y mejores prácticas. Sí, el consejo en inglés cuando yo contesté eso fue para entregar un buen servicio y un contrato claro en lo que va a entregar. Si usted está honesto y si usted habla muy claro con sus clientes y si usted dice lo que va a hacer y lo haces, nunca va a tener un problema. Especialmente con servicios, porque en Estados Unidos más que todo es su reputación. Si tiene una mala reputación, es más difícil, eso está mal. Y es más difícil ganar negocios. Es mejor ganarse de negocios con clientes felices. Es la mejor manera de ganar negocios y ganar clientes, es tener clientes felices. Yo hago lo mismo, yo tengo un negocio de servicios, yo quiero mi cliente muy feliz, entonces eso es mejor práctica. Sí, número dos es estar muy claro en diciendo lo que va a hacer y en cuándo lo va a hacerlo y comunicarse con los clientes si tiene problemas y dudas y eso muy claro y muy como atentamente, no, en tiempo, no tarde, no esperas. Eh, Y si tiene, y también seguros, puede pedir seguros para protegerse, pero con servicios el riesgo es muy bajo que va a tener muchos problemas. Yo uso contratos, engagement letters, eso es lo mismo, dice lo que voy a hacer y cuándo, y cuánto cuesta y lo que necesito y todo eso. Y nunca he tenido un problema. Tengo mi LLC, y mi equipo trabajando como contratistas independientes. Ya me acuerdo de eso. Le está pagando con una tarjeta de débito en mi cuenta bancaria de Estados Unidos. Ok, sería mejor tener diferentes LLCs o no importa. Si usted es extranjero y tiene un equipo pequeño, con algunas cuentas bancarias como Mercury y RelayFi, puede pedir varias tarjetas de débito y también varias cuentas bancarias del mismo cuenta. Entonces puede conectar una tarjeta a una cuenta bancaria y entregar eso a su equipo y ellos pueden sacar el dinero así. Eso no es la mejor manera para escalar, pero sirve para un equipo pequeño. Yo dice que siempre es mejor tener diferente LLC, pero así va a tener control de su cliente. Entonces, eso depende en su meta y su equipo la talla de su equipo, pero es una manera que sirve muy bien para algunos clientes y sirve bien. Si su cliente tiene otro negocio y otra cosa, yo creo que ellos no deben operar con ese subcuenta, pero puede usar la tarjeta para sacar el dinero sin problema. Tengo mi LLC e IN, pero no tengo un Itin. Pero ya podrías hacer a cualquier tipo de registro de crédito en los Estados Unidos, préstamos comerciales. Um, y eso es una buena pregunta. ¿Cómo crecer mi crédito en Estados Unidos y cómo sacar tarjeta de crédito en Estados Unidos? Eso es la pregunta. Um, En Estados Unidos, el sistema de crédito está basado muy fuerte en el crédito personal. Entonces, el crédito personal está basado en su historia de crédito, el monto de crédito disponible a usted y es todo de su historia. Cuánto crédito ha tenido, cuántos pagos tiene tarde, cuántos préstamos tiene abierto, cuántos préstamos ha recibido. Todo eso afecta sus puntos, su credit score. Y necesita ese credit score para pedir un credit card. Y necesita un Itin o un Social Security number para tener un credit score muy disponible. Algunas puntas muy importantes es que cuando tienes un Itin necesitas pedir un préstamo de un tarjeta de crédito asegurado o puede ser un préstamo de un auto, o puede ser un préstamo en su nombre. Y después que tiene algún préstamo o que está reportado a los credit bureaus, porque hay 3 compañías que monitora todo el crédito. Después que tiene su préstamo, tiene que esperar 6 o 7 meses hasta que tiene un perfil. Y con un Itin tiene que pedir su perfil con papel, con carta. Yo tengo más información al respecto de eso viniendo. Pero si tiene un Social Security Number, puede buscar en cuál hay demasiados servicios y tecnología que puede usar para pedir su credit score. Pero si tiene un Itin, tiene que hacerlo por papel. Y yo creo que sí, porque es imposible registrar para esas compañías que le puede convertir eso. Y también es muy difícil crecer su credit score, pero cuando tienes y tiene facilidad a comprar más cosas y pedir préstamos, va a subir su credit score y cuando tiene un credit score puede pedir préstamos, pero antes que tiene es muy difícil sacar tarjeta de crédito que no son asegurados y también diferentes tipos de préstamos. Puede puede buscar un préstamo de una casa o un carro que está basado en un activo, pero recibir efectivo para su negocio sea muy difícil, hace que tiene todo eso. Entonces es muy importante iniciar estableciendo eso lo más pronto posible porque es algo difícil hacer, pero no es imposible. Y dependiendo en el país donde estás, puede buscar un American Express Card si tiene un American Express en su país o si tiene un crédito en su país que usted puede usar. Es un tema muy complicado. Ok, no entiendo subvenciones, pero um, me pregunta, ¿cómo abro un non-profit en Estados Unidos para recibir los $10,000 de grants con Google? Eso es la pregunta. Si usted es un extranjero, sí, puede abrir un non-profit. Eso es una compañía que ha recibido aprobación del IRS para no pagar impuestos en Estados Unidos. Yo acabé de hacerlo para un cliente mío y hice como una donación, ¿no? Hice gratis. Y ellos recibió su carta diciendo que está reconocido como una compañía que no paga impuestos en Estados Unidos. Y con eso y un sitio web y toda su cosa preparado, puede pedir acceso a ese grants. Siempre yo voy a recomendar que usen una compañía calificada y con experiencia a manejar Google Grants. Y tengo un servicio para hacer esa creación y aplicación y aprobación. Es algo que hacemos. Podemos abrir un non-profit, aplicar y recibir aprobación para los grants y también recomendarse a una agencia. Pero eso es como la respuesta a esta pregunta. ¿Ok? Eso es una buena oportunidad, pero hay varias cosas que tiene que hacer. Mi negocio está iniciando, ¿tengo que llevar contabilidad mensual o es más como cumplimiento anual? En Estados Unidos, ¿tengo que hacer contabilidad mensual? Eso es la pregunta. Y mi respuesta es que no tiene que mandar su contabilidad mensual a nadie. Dependiendo en su negocio, lo que está haciendo, es posible que tiene que pagar un montón de impuestos cada 3 meses, pero para la mayoría de mis clientes que están afuera de Estados Unidos no está pagando impuestos y no hay requerimiento a hacer su contabilidad mensualmente. Técnicamente sí hay un requerimiento hacerlo, pero el IRS nunca he visto a ellos preguntando eso y si ellos se preguntan, tenemos 60 días para hacerlo y podemos hacerlo. Para la mayoría de nuestros clientes, hacemos la contabilidad al final del año porque tienen negocios de servicios o cosas un poco sencillo y la gente que tiene negocios más grandes, podemos hacer, claro, la contabilidad para ellos, pero eso no es un requerimiento, es más, es muy útil, es muy importante para su negocio saber lo que está pasando. Entonces, no es un requerimiento que en otros países, pero es recomendado. Tengo un comercio electrónico en Etsy y vendo a clientes de Estados Unidos y fuera de Estados Unidos. Para los impuestos sobre la venta, tengo que llevar registro diferente. Si está vendiendo en Etsy o Amazon, no tiene que pagar impuestos sobre la venta respecto de esas ventas porque ellos se va a retener y hacer los pagos. Solo si está vendiendo en su propio sitio web, solo en ese ejemplo tiene que recoger, cobrar los impuestos y recoger los impuestos sobre la venta y mandarlo a los estados. Cuando se pase los Economic Nexus Thresholds, disculpa, no sé cómo decirlo en español, pero cuando se pasa algún monto de ventas, tiene que registrar en los estados. Y solo cuando está vendiendo afuera de una plataforma como Walmart, Amazon, Etsy, eBay, si está vendiendo en su propio sitio web. Por ejemplo, normalmente los montos básicos son 200 ventas o 100,000 en ventas. $100,000 de ventas o 200 ventas individuales. Entonces, si vende en su sitio más que 200 cosas o más que $100,000, es probable que en un año, en un periodo de un año, tiene que registrar en ese estado. Especialmente si está haciendo afuera de una plataforma como Amazon. Pero si está en Amazon, no tiene que hacer nada. Quizás si estás comprando su inventario de compañía de Estados Unidos, necesita un resale certificate para no pagar eso.